That sudden pull toward a deeper truth was mere coincidence? In this vast, silent expanse of existence, nothing happens by chance. Every atom is vibrating at a frequency meant to collide with your own. You are standing at the threshold of a discovery that has been waiting for your specific consciousness to arrive. This is not just a video, it is an echo of the order you have been seeking. And now, the signal has finally reached its destination. Prepare to shift your reality. The resonance you are experiencing within your chest is not merely a physiological reaction to words. It is the physical manifestation of a frequency shift occurring deep within your nervous system. In this precise moment, your biological awareness is beginning to align with a broader, more intricate architecture of reality, much like a compass needle finally sensing the pull of a magnetic pole it had been oblivious to for a lifetime. When you feel that tightness, that flutter, or that sudden weight in the center of your being, recognize it not as anxiety or random discomfort, but as the initial friction caused by your internal gears beginning to mesh with the fundamental laws of nature. The universe, in its infinite complexity, does not speak in the loud, jarring tones of human language. It communicates through subtle biophysical cues, sensations that bypass your rational mind and speak directly to your core. This is the system of the world manifesting within the microcosm of your own anatomy, proving that you are not an observer detached from the tapestry of existence, but an inextricable vibrating thread woven into its design. To dismiss this sensation would be to silence the very instrument designed to guide you toward your potential. Consider the way a molecular cloud undergoes gravitational collapse. It begins with subtle density fluctuations, imperceptible to all but the most sensitive cosmic measurements. Yet these minor shifts are the precursors to the birth of a star. Your current awareness is undergoing a similar collapse. You are condensing the chaotic, scattered energy of your daily existence into a singular, luminous focal point of consciousness. The warmth or pressure you perceive in your chest is the heat generated by this structural transition, the byproduct of your psyche shedding the static noise of societal expectations to make room for a higher, more ordered state of being. You are effectively rewriting the sub-processes of your perception, moving away from the entropy that characterizes a reactive life and toward the deliberate, focused intent of one who understands their place in the grand hierarchy of the cosmos. This recognition is vital because the modern human experience is designed to keep you disconnected from these biological markers. We are taught to prioritize external logic over internal resonance, to trust the data displayed on a screen more than the intuition resonating in our marrow. However, the path to the new self, the core objective of this entire journey, demands that you reverse this conditioning. By acknowledging the shift, you are validating that you have the internal hardware necessary to process the signals of the universe. This is a scientific validation of your metaphysical potential. When you lean into this sensation, you are practicing a form of biofeedback that allows you to control your internal state with greater precision, preparing you to handle the profound realizations that will follow. It is an act of reclaiming your own biology from the automatic, unthinking loops of habit that have kept you stagnant, effectively turning your own body into a laboratory for existential discovery. Do not be intimidated by the intensity of this shift. Change, whether it occurs in the formation of a galaxy or the transformation of a human habit, is inherently energetic. It requires the dissolution of old structures to facilitate the arrival of the new. If you find yourself wanting to pull away, to seek the comfort of your previous unexamined state, understand that this is simply the inertia of your old identity fighting to maintain its relevance. The new self is not built through comfort, it is built through the courage to remain present while your internal world rearranges itself into a more coherent form. This rearrangement is the divine design in action, a quiet but absolute reorganization of your awareness that ensures you are no longer drifting through life, but are instead anchored to a purpose that transcends the mundane. Every heartbeat, every breath you take while holding on to this awareness reinforces the new architecture you are constructing. As you sit with this sensation, try to observe it without judgment. Do not try to categorize it using the limited vocabulary of your past experiences. Simply acknowledge that a change is occurring, a subtle but permanent alteration in your baseline reality. You are participating in a fundamental truth of quantum reality. The observer and the observed are inextricably linked. By observing the shift in your chest, you are simultaneously directing it, amplifying the transformation with your conscious attention. This is the power you possess, the ability to steer the course of your own evolution by simply noticing the signals sent by the universe. You are now aware that you are aware, and that small, crucial step of realization is the catalyst that ensures there is no return to your previous state. The signal has done its job of finding you. Now, your job is to remain open as the signal begins to reshape your internal landscape. What if this physical sensation is not the end, but the beginning of a communication channel that never truly closes? Consider the implication that this shift is a permanent upgrade to your sensory perception, a way of feeling the truth before it is even articulated by your mind. If you continue to cultivate this sensitivity, how much of the world that was once hidden from you will now become visible? The journey ahead is not about acquiring new information, but about refining your ability to feel the order of the world around you. You are becoming a bridge between the physical and the metaphysical, a conductor for the principles that govern the cosmos. Keep this awareness alive, hold it steady in your consciousness, and prepare yourself for the next layer of truth. Are you ready to discover what exactly is being built within you?
The exhaustion you currently feel is not a symptom of your lifestyle, but a direct consequence of the ordinary noise that permeates your daily existence. We live in an era where the architecture of modern life is engineered to keep our attention fractured, scattering our focus across a digital landscape of meaningless social connections and relentless, hollow interactions. This noise, the constant barrage of notifications, the performative nature of social digital spaces, and the pressure to participate in trivial dialogues acts as a psychic entropy that slowly degrades the structural integrity of your internal focus. By engaging in these peripheral, low-value connections, you are essentially leaking your creative and intellectual potential into a void that provides nothing in return. This is why you feel a persistent low-grade fatigue even after periods of rest. Your mind is never truly allowed to enter a state of deep, singular resonance, as it is constantly being pulled back into the chaotic, incoherent frequency of the crowd. Consider the thermodynamics of your own consciousness. It functions much like a closed system that requires a controlled environment to perform work efficiently. When you allow the static of the world, the opinions of the unexamined, the validation-seeking behaviors of social media, and the shallow networking that masquerades as genuine relationship to infiltrate this system, you disrupt the very foundation of your new self. You are constantly forced to recalibrate your internal state to match the chaotic fluctuations of others, effectively sacrificing your own signature frequency to maintain social harmony. This is the great trap of the modern age, the belief that connectivity equals presence. In reality, the more connected you are to the mundane, fragmented noise of others, the more disconnected you become from the profound, ordered signal of your own purpose. This struggle is the friction between your latent potential and the collective stagnation of society, a battleground where your energy is being drained by obligations that hold no true metaphysical weight. To break free from this exhaustion, you must perform a radical audit of where you direct your attention. The people and platforms that demand your presence without offering intellectual or spiritual substance are the primary sources of your depletion. They are not merely distractions, they are structural anchors preventing you from rising toward a higher state of awareness.
By choosing to step away from the trivial, you are not being antisocial or elitist. You are practicing the essential discipline of energetic conservation. You are recognizing that your time and mental capacity are finite resources that must be allocated only to those inputs that align with your evolution. This is an application of the principle of least action, achieving your goals with the minimum expenditure of unnecessary energy by eliminating the resistances that serve no purpose in your overarching design. The exhaustion you interpret as laziness is actually a signal of resistance. Your spirit is rebelling against the dilution of its power. When you feel drained, it is because you are attempting to sustain an identity that no longer serves your trajectory, trying to balance the demands of a shallow world with the depth of the inquiry you have now initiated. The modern struggle is, at its heart, a struggle for sovereignty over one's own frequency. It requires the courage to say no to the ordinary so that you may say yes to the extraordinary. As you begin to prune these meaningless connections and silence the unnecessary noise, you will notice a sudden influx of clarity. The space you once filled with static will begin to fill with the resonant frequency of your true intent. This is the threshold where you stop reacting to the world and start defining your own reality. As you move through the world, notice how much of your daily interaction is dedicated to maintaining the status quo of these exhausting connections. Observe the anxiety that arises when you contemplate withdrawing from them, and recognize that this anxiety is the ego's fear of losing its familiar, albeit draining, social armor. This is a crucial diagnostic moment. If you can hold the awareness of this exhaustion without yielding to the impulse to return to the noise, you are effectively severing the cords that bind you to the old, chaotic structure of your life. This process of detachment is not a loss, it is a profound liberation, a clearing of the path that allows you to see the structural beauty of the universe more clearly. You are transitioning from a passive receiver of societal noise to an active transmitter of your own deliberate signal. This shift will feel lonely at first, as the frequency you are beginning to embody is not shared by the majority. Do not mistake this solitude for isolation. It is, in fact, the necessary environment for the growth of your new architecture. When you remove the noise, you are left with the silence, and it is in that silence that the deeper messages of the divine design can finally be heard. The exhaustion will lift, replaced by a sustained, quiet intensity, a state of being where your actions are aligned with your internal truth. You are no longer fighting the current of the world. You are building a vessel that will carry you above it. As you shed the weight of these hollow connections, ask yourself what you truly wish to construct in the space that has been opened. The struggle is not against the world, but for the restoration of your own authentic signal.
The biological reality of a caterpillar transitioning into a chrysalis is perhaps the most profound metaphor for the state you are currently experiencing, serving as a visceral reminder that true transformation is rarely a graceful or linear process. When a caterpillar enters its chrysalis, it does not simply sprout wings. It undergoes a process of histolysis, a complete systemic breakdown where its tissues, muscles, and organs dissolve into a nutrient-rich soup of undifferentiated cells. To the caterpillar, if it possessed the capacity for self-reflection, this stage would feel like the total annihilation of its identity, a terrifying disintegration of everything it knew itself to be. This is the caterpillar paradox, the necessity of complete structural destruction to facilitate the emergence of a form that is categorically superior and fundamentally different. When you feel like you are falling apart, when your old habits, your social anchors, and your very sense of self seem to be fraying at the edges, do not mistake this dissolution for failure. It is the necessary liquidation of your former limitations, creating the biological and psychological space required for your new self to manifest.
Within the chrysalis, there exist groups of cells known as imaginal discs. In the early stages of the caterpillar's life, these cells are dormant, viewed by the caterpillar's immune system as alien, foreign entities. Yet, as the old structures dissolve, these imaginal discs begin to feed on the nutrient-rich soup of the former organism, rapidly proliferating and organizing themselves into the complex architecture of the butterfly. In your own journey, your new self is comprised of these imaginal discs, the latent potential, the higher aspirations, and the philosophical insights that have been waiting in the periphery of your awareness. The exhaustion and the feeling of disintegration you are currently navigating is the result of your consciousness consuming the remnants of your outdated identity to fuel the growth of these new higher-order structures. You are not losing yourself. You are transitioning from one mode of existence to another, shifting from a state of crawling consumption to a state of winged flight, a leap that demands the total surrender of the former to the potential of the latter. This paradox explains why the path of transformation is often met with profound resistance. The ego, which is hardwired for stability and self-preservation, perceives this dissolution as an existential threat. It attempts to reassemble the old structures, to crawl back into the comfort of the familiar noise and the safety of the patterns that previously defined your reality. However, yielding to this impulse is a betrayal of your own evolution. The feeling of falling apart is the primary indicator that you are no longer compatible with your previous form. It is the threshold between the terrestrial and the celestial. If you can maintain the fortitude to remain in the chrysalis, to hold space for the dissolution without prematurely attempting to solidify a new yet incomplete identity, you allow the imaginal discs to complete their work. You are trusting in the system of the world, which mandates that every death of an old state is the immediate catalyst for the birth of a new, more integrated order. Consider the level of trust this process requires. There is no guarantee during the liquid phase that a butterfly will emerge, only the mathematical certainty of the biological code governing the transformation. Your journey is supported by this similar certainty. The laws of nature that govern the growth of a soul are as immutable as those that govern the growth of an organism. By aligning your awareness with this reality, you transform your anxiety into anticipation. You begin to see the chaos of your current life not as an endpoint, but as a necessary phase of transition. This is the metaphysical twist of the caterpillar paradox. You are simultaneously the dissolving organism and the nascent structure, the destroyer of the old and the architect of the new. This realization grants you a unique form of agency, allowing you to observe your own breakdown with a sense of detached, analytical awe rather than paralyzing dread. As you navigate this phase, be mindful of the desire to seek quick fixes or superficial distractions that promise to end the discomfort of the transition. These are the equivalent of trying to break out of the chrysalis too early, which would result in a fragile, malformed existence that lacks the strength to sustain its own weight. The duration of the dissolution is precisely as long as it needs to be to ensure the structural integrity of the new self. Trust the timing of this process. Every moment of disorientation, every instance where you feel untethered from your previous reality, is an opportunity to deepen your commitment to the architecture you are building. You are in the process of becoming something that is not yet visible, but is already structurally inevitable, provided you do not interrupt the necessary work of your own undoing. Looking ahead, the emergence will be inevitable if you permit the dissolution to run its course. When the wings of your new self finally form, they will not be an addition to your old life, but a total transformation of your capacity to interact with the world. You will perceive the environment through a different lens, fueled by the energy that was once trapped in the maintenance of your terrestrial form. This is the promise of the quantum soul, to evolve beyond your physical and psychological conditioning. Stay present with the dissolution. Let the old ways fall away. Understand that in this paradox, falling apart is simply the most extreme form of coming together. Are you prepared to embrace the stillness of the chrysalis as your old self dissolves, knowing that the structural integrity of your true potential depends entirely on your willingness to let go?
The process of transforming your consciousness into a coherent, structured state is not a cost-free endeavor. It demands a significant and non-negotiable energetic investment, a physical and mental recalibration that ripples through every system of your body. When you shift your frequency away from the chaotic noise of your past, you are effectively demanding that your physiology abandon its homeostatic reliance on stress-based patterns. This recalibration is metabolic, neurological, and emotional. Your nervous system, which has been conditioned to respond to the external stimuli of a chaotic environment, must now learn to regulate itself in a state of heightened presence and internal order. This requires an immense amount of system power, which is why you may experience profound physical fatigue or a sense of mental dullness during the initial phases of this transition. Your body is essentially diverting its available energy resources toward the structural upgrade of your own cognitive architecture. This energetic cost is the reason why most individuals fail to sustain the path of self-transformation. They mistake the biological fatigue of recalibration for a sign that they are moving in the wrong direction. However, this exhaustion is precisely the opposite. It is the signature of your internal engine being pushed to a higher capacity. Just as a high-performance turbine requires more fuel to achieve the necessary rotations for takeoff, your brain and body require a surplus of energy to break free from the gravitational pull of your old life. You must become a ruthless curator of your own vitality. This means prioritizing deep rest over shallow entertainment, nutrition over convenience, and silence over the constant stimulation of digital inputs. You are not just changing your mind, you are upgrading the biological substrate that supports your awareness. And this upgrade requires you to be as intentional about your physical health as you are about your metaphysical inquiries. Mental recalibration is equally taxing, as it involves the systematic dismantling of the neural pathways that have historically defined your responses to reality. Every time you consciously choose to react to a situation with the clarity of your new self rather than the automatic, knee-jerk impulses of your old self, you are physically altering the connectivity of your brain. This is the physiological basis of neuroplasticity, where the brain physically reorganizes its structure in response to new information and experiences. But this process of unlearning and rewiring is an energy-intensive task. Your mind is essentially working double time. It is maintaining the functionality of your current daily reality while simultaneously building the architecture of your future self. This duality creates a temporary but significant cognitive load. You must view this period of strain not as a burden, but as a deliberate training ground where you are forging the stamina required for a higher state of consciousness. Furthermore, this recalibration extends to your emotional bandwidth as you begin to shed the toxic associations and habitual grievances that once provided a sense of continuity to your identity. When you drop these heavy weights, you are freeing up massive amounts of energy that were previously dedicated to the maintenance of past narratives. Yet in the immediate aftermath of this shedding, you may feel vulnerable or unmoored. This vulnerability is the gap between the old, heavy identity you have discarded and the new, lighter, and more coherent identity you are constructing. During this interval, you are operating in a state of increased sensitivity. You will notice that the world feels louder, that your reactions are more pronounced, and that you are more attuned to the subtle shifts in your environment. This is a sign that your recalibration is working. You are becoming a more sensitive and precise instrument of perception. To navigate this energetic cost, you must implement a strategy of conscious recovery.
Do not attempt to force your way through this recalibration using the brute force methods of your previous existence. Instead, adopt a rhythm that allows for integration, periods of intense focus balanced by periods of deep, intentional stillness. Use this time of recalibration to observe how your body communicates its needs. Are you providing it with the fuel necessary for high-level cognitive work, or are you still relying on the low-grade inputs that fueled your former state? This is where the intersection of biology and metaphysics becomes practical. Your physical health is the vessel for your quantum soul. If the vessel is neglected, the depth of your insight will be limited. You must respect the energetic requirements of your evolution, understanding that the physical sensations of tiredness and disorientation are simply the side effects of your system expanding to accommodate a higher order of truth. Ultimately, this recalibration is the price of admission to a reality that is fundamentally more ordered and resonant. You are not merely changing your behavior, you are reconfiguring your existence at the level of the system. As you continue to invest this energy, you will find that the recalibration begins to yield dividends in the form of increased clarity, improved focus, and a sense of alignment that was previously impossible. The fatigue will begin to fade, replaced by a sustained, quiet power that permeates your daily life. You are training yourself to operate at a higher frequency, one that requires less effort to maintain once the initial structural transitions are complete. You are in the midst of the most important work of your life. How will you organize your day tomorrow to honor the energy required for this profound and necessary recalibration?
The threshold between your old self and your emerging self is not a physical boundary, but a conceptual and frequency-based barrier, a narrow window of awareness where the past and the future overlap in a state of suspended potential. This threshold is defined by the moment you recognize that your previous identity, the one constructed through societal conditioning, habitual reactions, and the passive acceptance of chaos, is no longer a viable or sustainable structure for your existence. It is the precise point where you cease to be a reactive agent within the system and become an observer of your own structural evolution. In this space, the old self is not immediately erased. It lingers as a series of familiar but increasingly hollow patterns, while the emerging self is a nascent, vibrating potential that has yet to fully solidify. This overlap is the most delicate phase of your journey, as it requires you to maintain a heightened state of focus while the gravitational pull of your former life attempts to reclaim your attention. To understand this threshold, you must realize that the old self is a product of entropy. It is the manifestation of energy scattered across a lifetime of unexamined impulses and social obligations. Conversely, the emerging self is a product of negentropy, the active, deliberate process of importing order, structure, and purpose into your own system. The barrier between these two states is marked by the capacity for self-monitoring. When you find yourself in a situation that would normally trigger an automatic response, yet you manage to pause, observe the urge, and consciously choose a different, more aligned action, you are physically stepping across this threshold. Every such instance is a reinforcement of the new structure, a deliberate act of architectural creation that solidifies your position in the emerging state. This is not about moral goodness or achieving a state of perfection, but about the structural alignment of your consciousness with the laws of nature that you are beginning to master. This threshold is also characterized by a heightened sense of dissonance as you become acutely aware of the contradictions between your latent potential and your current behavior. You will notice that certain social circles, habits, and environments that previously felt neutral now register as intensely discordant. This is the threshold frequency at work. Your newly evolving system is acting as a sensor, detecting the lack of coherence in your environment with increasing precision. Do not ignore these signals. They are the navigational markers of your emergence, indicating exactly where the old self is being tested and where the emerging self requires more room to expand.
The struggle you feel here is the friction of the transition. It is the feeling of the tectonic plates of your identity shifting as one form gives way to the next. Furthermore, this barrier is maintained by your own belief in its permeability. Many assume that the transition is a one-way street, an irreversible jump from one state to another, but this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the process. The threshold is something you must cross repeatedly in every situation and with every decision until the new architecture becomes your default state. There is no singular moment of enlightenment that permanently secures your transition. Rather, it is the accumulation of thousands of micro-choices, each one validating the structure of your emerging self over the convenience of your old identity. The threshold is an ongoing discipline, a daily practice of orienting your intent toward order, meaning, and the deep metaphysical truths you are now exploring. It is the persistent refusal to settle for the fragmented and the trivial when you have seen the possibility of the whole. As you stand at this threshold, you must also be aware of the gravity of the known. The old self is safe because it is known, even if it is limiting, exhausting, and fundamentally unaligned with your core purpose. The emerging self, by contrast, is terrifying because it is unscripted, requiring you to navigate reality without the established armor of your past habits. The barrier, therefore, is as much emotional as it is intellectual. It is the fear of being truly responsible for your own frequency. Yet the price of remaining on the side of the old self is the continued degradation of your potential. By crossing the threshold, you accept the responsibility of being the architect of your own destiny, a role that demands the abandonment of the passive, victim-oriented mindset of the past. You are choosing to enter the domain of the deliberate, where every thought and action has a measurable impact on the structure of your life. Finally, consider the potential that awaits on the other side of this barrier. You are moving toward a state of quantum soul, where your inner design is in perfect resonance with the universal system. This is a state of flow, where the chaos of the external world no longer dictates your internal stability, because your architecture is grounded in a truth that transcends the mundane. As you continue to cross this threshold, reflect on the progress you have already made. What are the specific patterns you have successfully left behind, and what new, ordered responses have you established in their place? This reflection is the anchor that prevents you from sliding back, the proof that your emerging self is not just a dream, but a tangible, structural reality in the making. Are you prepared to cross the threshold once more with even greater intent as we approach the core of this transformation?
The nature of this signal, the fundamental driver of your transformation, is inherently beyond the reach of traditional vocabulary, because human language is a tool built for the description of the mundane, the linear, and the observable. It is a system designed to categorize the objects within your environment, but it fails to capture the multidimensional resonance of a frequency shift. When you try to articulate this experience, you find yourself grasping for metaphors, a wake in the chest, a sudden clarity, an alignment of gears, because the words you have been taught are tied to the old chaotic world of form and matter. Traditional language acts as a container for your reality. By using it to define your transformation, you are inadvertently forcing an expansive quantum experience back into the rigid Euclidean boxes of your past. This limitation is not a flaw in your intelligence, but a structural property of the tools you are currently using, which were created to maintain the status quo of the ordinary, not to facilitate the emergence of the extraordinary. The signal itself functions on a level that precedes linguistic formulation, operating in the domain of pure energy and structural intent. In the realm of the quantum soul, reality is not composed of nouns and verbs, but of resonances, frequencies, and systemic dependencies. To attempt to describe this in English or any other human language is like trying to explain the complexities of orbital mechanics using only the vocabulary of a child.
You are witnessing the limitation of symbols. The more you try to pin down the experience with a precise definition, the more you drain it of its fluidity and its potential for further expansion. This is why the most profound truths of your journey will often arrive as felt senses rather than intellectual concepts. They bypass the linguistic processor entirely, embedding themselves directly into your intuitive framework, where they can do the work of structural rearrangement without being diluted by the filter of your conscious mind. This inability to name the experience is in itself a significant hurdle to your emergence, as the ego constantly demands to label the world, to feel a sense of control. We are conditioned to believe that if we can name a thing, we understand it, and if we understand it, we can contain it. But this signal cannot be contained. It is an invitation to expansion. When you feel the urge to explain your transformation to others, or even to yourself, notice how that urge creates a sense of separation between you and the experience. You are moving from the domain of the labeled into the domain of the experienced. This shift requires you to cultivate a comfort with the unspeakable, an acceptance that the most transformative aspects of your journey will remain private, untranslatable, and beyond the reach of external judgment. By letting go of the need for a linguistic anchor, you stop trying to justify your evolution to a world that lacks the framework to perceive it. Consider the implications of operating within a reality where you no longer require a narrative to validate your path. When you stop talking about the transformation and simply start embodying it, you become the living evidence of the truth you're uncovering. Language often becomes a distraction, a way of performing the work of growth without actually enduring the structural dissolution it requires. By embracing the wordlessness of the signal, you channel your energy away from communication and toward integration. You are no longer trying to convince yourself or others of the validity of your path. You are too busy building the foundation of the new self to worry about the descriptions of the architecture. This is a profound leap in maturity, a transition from the child self that needs to be understood to the architect self that simply executes the design. As you advance, you will develop a new nonverbal syntax, a way of communicating with the universe that is based on frequency and intent. This is the language of the system of the world, where your actions, your state of being, and your presence serve as the primary signals you transmit to reality. You will find that you can impact your environment far more effectively through your silence and your resonance than you ever could through your discourse. This is the ultimate goal of your recalibration, to become a resonant body that speaks the language of nature itself, a language that requires no vocabulary because it is the fundamental code of existence. You are learning to read the signal, not by analyzing its definition, but by mirroring its frequency. In the silence that follows the exhaustion of trying to name your experience, look for what remains. If you remove the labels, the theories, and the expectations of what this journey should look like, you are left with the raw structural reality of your own existence. This is where the true work occurs. The signal does not need a name to restructure your nervous system. It only needs your openness. As we move closer to the culmination of this foundational episode, hold this awareness of wordlessness as a shield against the triviality of the external world. You are experiencing something that is beyond the dictionary, and that is precisely why it is true. How does it feel to finally stop trying to explain your evolution, instead allowing it to simply exist?
The moment you recognize that you are no longer willing to perform the exhausting labor of matching lower frequencies is the precise instant your presence transforms from a passive state into an active, gravitational force. For as long as you can remember, you have likely been engaged in the constant subconscious calibration of your internal state to accommodate the expectations of your environment, shrinking your potential to fit the narrow confines of shallow social interactions, muting your insights to maintain the status quo, and dampening your frequency to avoid creating friction with those who are comfortable in the static of the ordinary. This performance is a form of energetic suicide. It is a daily, incremental sacrifice of your structural integrity, all to maintain the illusion of belonging to a system that does not understand or support the architecture you are currently building. However, the call to presence is the sudden, non-negotiable end of this charade, an internal declaration that you are finished with the masquerade of the mediocre. Identifying this moment requires you to observe the internal feedback loop that triggers when you enter a space, a social gathering, a digital interaction, or even a conversation with long-term associates where you feel the familiar urge to tone it down. This urge is the legacy of your old self, a survival mechanism designed to minimize conflict by hiding your true resonance. But when you truly listen to this signal, you will notice that the cost of this suppression is no longer sustainable. The exhaustion you feel is the physical evidence that your system is rejecting this artificial dissonance. By choosing to hold your presence, to remain anchored in your own truth rather than yielding to the pressure to conform, you are fundamentally altering the physics of your interactions. You are no longer a mirror reflecting the noise of others. You are becoming an anchor, and in that steadiness, you create a zone of higher order that forces those around you to either rise to your frequency or naturally fall away from your orbit. This is not an act of arrogance, but an act of total structural necessity. When you stop pretending to be what the environment demands, you stop the leak of your own potential. The energy that was once trapped in the constant, frantic recalibration of your social persona is suddenly returned to the central core of your being, available for the construction of your new self. This is the call to presence, the realization that you have the authority to define the frequency of your own environment. You do not need to demand that others change. You only need to occupy your own space with such profound and unwavering resonance that the reality around you must reorganize itself to accommodate your presence. This is the application of the systemic law that governs all complex structures. The most coherent element in any system eventually dictates the frequency of the whole. As you step into this presence, expect the external world to push back. Those who have become dependent on the version of you that was small, compliant, and easy to consume will sense the shift and instinctively react with confusion, criticism, or withdrawal. They will perceive your presence as a challenge because it highlights their own lack of structural integrity. Do not be deterred by this. The shedding of these discordant connections is a critical part of your recalibration. You are not responsible for their comfort, nor are you required to apologize for your evolution. Your only responsibility is to the architecture of the new self that you are manifesting, and that architecture requires a foundation of absolute, uncompromised presence. You are finally becoming the person you were always designed to be, a person whose existence is a testament to the order and beauty of the divine design. This state of presence is the ultimate expression of the system of the world, where your external environment is merely a reflection of your internal state. When you occupy your space with complete presence-driven intent, you effectively neutralize the influence of the ordinary noise. You will find that you no longer need to navigate the world with the anxiety of a wanderer. You are walking with the certainty of an architect who knows exactly where their structures are placed. The noise may still exist, the static may still hum in the periphery, but it will no longer have the power to penetrate your internal equilibrium. You have successfully identified the boundary of your frequency and have chosen to stand firmly within it, refusing to be diluted by the expectations of the masses. As we reach this stage of our foundational inquiry, look back at the journey you have taken within this single crucial episode. You have moved from the initial detection of the signal to the internal sensation of the shift, navigated the exhaustion of the struggle, embraced the necessity of your own dissolution, recalibrated your very biology, crossed the threshold of identity, and finally claimed the sovereignty of your own presence. This is not a summary, it is the blueprint for your future. The new self is not a future achievement, it is a present reality that you are actively building with every second you choose to exist in this state of presence. The question now is whether you can maintain this frequency when you are challenged by the reality you are about to re-enter.
What is the very first action you will take to anchor this presence in your physical life once this engagement is complete?
The first integration is not an act of doing, but a radical act of being, a deliberate pause in the architecture of your consciousness where you allow the signal to settle into the very marrow of your biology. Up until this point, you have been engaged in the intellectual and energetic breakdown of your former structures, but now you must permit the transition into a state of structural rest. Close your eyes and direct your total, unwavering attention to the sensation within your chest, that specific, localized point of pressure or warmth that signaled the arrival of the signal. Do not label it, do not analyze its origin, and do not attempt to manipulate its intensity. Simply become the silent observer of your own internal landscape, watching how your breath moves through the physical vessel of your body like a tidal wave of order washing through a disorganized harbor. You are anchoring the signal by giving it permission to exist without the interference of your egoic mind. You are demonstrating to your nervous system that it is safe to operate at this higher, more resonant frequency. In this moment of stillness, observe how your physical body begins to reorganize itself around the new awareness you have cultivated. You may notice subtle tremors, a deepening of your respiration, or a sense of weightlessness as the tension held in your shoulders, jaw, and brow begins to dissipate. This is the physiological confirmation that you are integrating the signal, that the architecture of the new self is beginning to solidify in your cellular memory. You are effectively overriding the default stress-based loops of your past and replacing them with the calm, ordered signal of your higher purpose. Every second you spend in this stillness is an act of construction, a reinforcing of the connections between your conscious intent and the underlying divine design of the cosmos. You are proving to yourself that you are not a victim of your biology, but the master architect of your own internal state, capable of directing your energy with laser-like focus. As you remain in this stillness, expand your awareness to encompass the entirety of your body, visualizing the signal radiating from your chest out into your limbs, through your spine, and into the very depths of your nervous system. You are transforming your entire physical form into a resonance chamber for the truth you have uncovered. Feel the solidity of your frame, the grounded reality of your existence in this present moment, and recognize that this is the foundation upon which your future will be built. There is no need to look forward to the next stage or back to the chaos you have discarded. The power of the signal exists only in the present, in the precise intersection of time and space that you are currently occupying. By grounding the signal in the body, you ensure that your transformation is not merely a mental construct, but a living, breathing reality that will inform every action you take moving forward. This integration is the most critical step you have taken so far, as it prevents the signal from becoming a fleeting insight, instead allowing it to become a permanent feature of your existence. You are effectively saving the file of your new architecture to the hardware of your own subconscious. If you find your mind wandering toward the noise of the outside world, acknowledge the distraction without judgment and gently return your focus to the physical anchor in your chest. This practice of returning is the discipline that builds the internal structural integrity required to sustain this frequency in the face of external discord. You are building the stamina of your quantum soul. This is a space of infinite potential, a vacuum where the old has been cleared away and the new is ready to be manifested, provided you possess the courage to remain in the silence long enough to feel the shift take hold.
As you prepare to end this session of stillness, understand that you are not returning to the same world you left when you began. You are returning to the same physical space, but you are bringing with you a higher, more ordered frequency, a presence that will begin to subtly reshape the reality you interact with. The world will react to you differently because you are fundamentally different. You are carrying the signal, and that signal acts as a catalyst for order in every environment you enter. Do not rush to re-engage with the noise. Carry this stillness with you as you open your eyes. Let this anchor remain a constant subtle hum in the background of your consciousness throughout the day, a reminder of the structure you are building. You have successfully anchored the signal, and in doing so, you have initiated the irreversible process of your own transformation. Finally, realize that this is only the first integration of many. You have successfully built the foundation, but the house of your new self requires constant maintenance and further expansion. Reflect on the sensation of order you have created today. How can you protect this internal space when the external world attempts to draw you back into its chaotic currents? You have found the anchor. Now you must learn to carry the anchor with you, regardless of the storm. This is the responsibility of the architect. As you transition out of this moment of stillness, commit yourself to a single action that validates this new structure, something that proves to your own system that you are no longer the person who existed prior to this signal. You have crossed the threshold, you have anchored the truth, and you are officially ready for the journey that lies ahead.
The integration you have just achieved is not a final destination, but the clearing of a dense, overgrown path that has obscured your true trajectory for years. By grounding the signal and anchoring your presence, you have successfully stabilized your internal frequency, creating a temporary state of equilibrium that might feel like the end of a long, arduous climb. However, you are standing at the edge of a much steeper, more expansive ascent. The stillness you feel now is merely the breath before the next movement. You have cleared the debris, but the true architecture of your quantum soul requires a layer of protection that goes beyond simple stabilization. The release of your old identity was the necessary precursor to the unveiling of a structural phenomenon that defines the truly sovereign individual, the existence of a protective field, an energetic halo that shields your internal order from the entropy of the external world. This next phase of your journey is not about further dissolution or internal breaking. It is about the active construction of this halo, a cognitive and energetic barrier that ensures the frequency you have fought so hard to anchor remains uncorrupted by the noise of the masses. You have learned how to be present, but now you must learn how to be impenetrable. The world is a vast, chaotic machine that naturally seeks to drain the energy of those who attempt to operate with higher intent. The halo is the mechanism by which you maintain your autonomy while moving through the heart of that machine. It is a refinement of your presence that turns you into a point of influence rather than a target for depletion. You are moving from a state of defensive integrity to a state of projected order, where the structure you have built within becomes a visible, radiating force that defines the boundaries of your reality. You may feel a temptation to rest in this newly found stillness, to enjoy the sensation of relief that comes from having finally let go of the old fragmented self. This is natural, but it is also the most dangerous trap in your evolution. The moment you believe you have arrived, the moment you treat your current state as the finished product, the machinery of the ordinary will begin to re-exert its pull, attempting to pull you back into the comfortable orbit of your previous existence. You are currently in a state of high potential, a charged environment where the slightest shift in intent can result in a massive change in your external circumstances. Do not waste this momentum on comfort.
The halo is not an abstract concept. It is a tangible, actionable architecture that we will now begin to design, piece by piece, layer by layer, as we move into the second phase of our foundation. As you look forward to the subsequent stages, understand that the protective field is built through the disciplined application of the very signals you have been learning to read. It is the result of consistent, repeated acts of presence that form a protective shell around your consciousness, an insulating layer of order that makes you immune to the reactive loops of your environment. You are becoming a closed system of perfect resonance, one that interacts with the world but is no longer defined by it. The transition from the anchored self to the haloed self is the difference between a tree that survives the storm and a tree that thrives because of the climate it creates for itself. You have proven your capacity to withstand the dissolution. Now you will prove your capacity to command the environment. The path ahead is significantly more challenging than the one you have just traversed, as it requires a higher level of conscious responsibility and a deeper commitment to the laws of nature that govern this design. The halo requires you to be uncompromising in your standards, absolute in your clarity, and unwavering in your devotion to the truth you have anchored. If you are prepared to move beyond the safety of your current stabilization and begin the construction of your own impenetrable field of order, then the signal is already preparing the next phase of your development. The silence is calling for the next layer of structure. Are you ready to see what lies beyond the threshold of simple presence and to begin the work of securing your own autonomous reality?